Segnali di prescrizione.
Prescription signs are signs that force us to behave very precisely, very important for our safety and that of others. We find them on the right side of the road and are valid immediately and always unless we see them integrated with a panel that shows at different times or the beginning, continuation, and end. After passing an intersection we can find them repeated to tell us that we still have to behave as the sign says. The prescription signs are of three types: prohibition signs, mandatory signs, and precedence signs.
Segnali di divieto.
Prohibition signs. Prohibition signs belong to the category of prescription signs and are used to prohibit certain behaviors from drivers. Normally they are valid for the whole 24 hours. However, they can be supplemented by panels that indicate a time slot of validity.
Divieto di transito.
No passing. This sign is placed on both entrances to the road and prohibits two-way traffic for all motorized and non-motorized vehicles. It therefore allows transit only for pedestrians and may be valid for a limited time. Indicated in an additional panel.
Divieto di transito per autotreni ed autoarticolati.
No transit for trucks and articulated lorries. This sign is a driving ban for certain categories of vehicles. In this case it prohibits the transit of lorries and articulated lorries, so all vehicles can pass, except those of the categories represented in the figure.
Senso vietato.
Prohibited sense. This sign prohibits entering an accessible street instead from the other side, because it is one way. Furthermore, the prohibition imposed by the sign must be respected by all vehicles, even those without an engine. It always applies, both day and night. We are very careful in the quizzes not to confuse these two no passing signs.
Divieto di sorpasso.
And no overtaking signs. This signal prohibits overtaking between vehicles of any mass, even if the maneuver can be carried out within the carriageway, that is, without crossing the center line. It can also be found on both urban and suburban roads and prohibits overtaking all motor vehicles other than motorcycles and mopeds. Therefore, regardless of the vehicle we are driving, we can overtake motorcycles and mopeds, but also bicycles, arm-type or animal-powered vehicles. Attention in the quizzes: it makes no difference whether we are driving a car or a motorcycle. What matters is that we can only overtake motorcycles, mopeds and vehicles without engines. Now let's see an example. The no overtaking sign can be repeated after each intersection with supplementary panel B, to make us understand that the prescription continues the end of the no overtaking.
Fine del divieto di sorpasso.
What we see is an end of prescription sign that indicates the end of the overtaking ban previously imposed by the sign seen a little while ago. However, the general rules for the execution of the overtaking maneuver, such as the prohibition of overtaking, are once again valid. If to carry out the maneuver we have to cross the continuous white line.
Divieto di sorpasso per autocarri superiori a 3,5 tonnellate.
No overtaking for trucks over 3.5 tons. This sign prohibits vehicles with a fully laden mass exceeding 3.5 tons from overtaking motor vehicles. The ban applies only to vehicles not intended for the transport of people. It also forbids them from overtaking any motor vehicle. Even mopeds, on the other hand, can overtake vehicles without an engine. For example, bikes within the carriageway refer to the fully laden mass indicated on the registration certificate. Therefore, in the presence of this signal, a truck vehicle not intended for the transport of persons cannot overtake motor vehicles, even if at the moment in which it circulates it does not exceed 3.5 tons. Why is it empty? We pay attention in the quizzes. It has an essential point that we reiterate here. The ban does not apply to vehicles intended for the transport of people, even if they exceed 3.5 tons, such as buses, caravans, campers, or vehicle complexes consisting of cars towing caravans, trailers.
Fine del divieto di sorpasso per autocarri superiori a 3,5 tonnellate.
End of the overtaking ban for trucks over 3.5 tons. This is an end of statute of limitations sign indicating the end of the overtaking ban for fully laden freight vehicles over 3.5 tons, allowing a truck or train car to overtake any motorized or non-motorized vehicle.
Distanziamento minimo obbligatorio 70 metri.
Mandatory minimum spacing 70 meters. This sign prohibits a vehicle from driving within 70 meters of the vehicle in front of it. Therefore the minimum distance indicated must be respected regardless of the speed at which you are traveling and refers to all motor vehicles, including motorcycles.
Limite massimo di velocità 80 km/h.
Maximum speed limit 80 km per hour. This is a prohibition-type prescription sign that requires you to drive at speeds less than or equal to 80 km per hour. It can also be found on highways. It is valid immediately after the signal itself. It is normally valid 24 hours a day and refers to all vehicles, including motorcycles.
Fine del limite massimo di velocità di 50 km/h.
End of the maximum speed limit of 50 km per hour. This is an end of prescription sign indicating the end of the maximum speed limit. It therefore allows you to travel at speeds below or above 50 km per hour, while respecting the general speed limits in force for the type of road you are on.
Divieto di segnalazioni acustiche.
Prohibition of acoustic signals. This sign indicates the start of an area where honking is prohibited. However, it is permitted, in the presence of the signal shown, to use the horn only in certain circumstances, such as for example in the event of immediate danger to avoid accidents or when transporting injured or seriously ill patients. It is valid for the entire 24-hour period, unless otherwise indicated.
Divieto di transito ai pedoni.
Pedestrians are prohibited from passing. This sign prohibits pedestrians from passing through. It is valid 24 hours a day, unless otherwise indicated. And it allows transit to all types of vehicles.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli a braccia.
No transit to vehicles embraces the signal, prohibits the transit of armored vehicles such as hand carts. It is generally valid 24 hours a day and allows transit to all other types of vehicles.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli a trazione animale.
No transit of animal-drawn vehicles. This sign prohibits the transit of animal-drawn vehicles, such as horse-drawn carriages or vehicles pulled by donkeys or oxen, regardless of whether the vehicle is fitted with tires or not. It also allows the transit of other types of vehicles and is normally valid 24 hours a day.
Divieto di transito alle biciclette.
Ban on bicycles. This sign prohibits the transit of bicycles and the like, such as pedal quadricycles or tandem bicycles with 2 seats in line. It also allows the transit of pedestrians and all other vehicles and is valid for the whole 24 hours.
Divieto di transito ai motocicli.
Prohibition of transit to motorcycles. This sign prohibits the transit of motorcycles of any displacement with or without a safety cell. Attention, we talked about a ban on motorcycles only. Therefore, the transit of bicycles and mopeds, motor tricycles and quadricycles and motor vehicles in general is allowed.
Divieto di transito ad autoveicoli e motoveicoli a 3 o più ruote.
Prohibition of transit to motor vehicles and motor vehicles with 3 or more wheels. This sign prohibits the transit of all motor vehicles and motor vehicles with 3 or more wheels, such as tricycles and quadricycles. It therefore allows the transit of non-motorized vehicles, 2-wheeled mopeds and motorcycles.
Divieto di transito agli autobus.
No transit to buses. This sign indicates the ban on buses of any laden mass and category. School bus tourist line is always valid both on weekdays and holidays.
Divieto di transito agli autocarri che superano 3,5 tonnellate.
No transit of lorries exceeding 3.5 tons. This sign prohibits the transit of vehicles used for the transport of goods with a fully loaded mass exceeding 3.5 tons, regardless of the type of open or closed bodywork. It refers to the mass indicated in the registration certificate and can be equipped with an additional panel with a different value of the mass admitted to transit. It has value both for single vehicles and for road train complexes. It does not apply to vehicles intended for the transport of people of any kind, such as motor cars or buses.
Divieto di transito agli autocarri che superano 6,5 tonnellate.
No transit of lorries over 6.5 tons. This sign prohibits the transit of trucks and special-purpose vehicles with a laden mass exceeding 6.5 tons. It refers to the laden mass indicated on the registration certificate and does not apply to vehicles intended for the transport of people.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli a motore trainanti un rimorchio.
No transit of towing motor vehicles. A trailer. This sign prohibits the transit of towing motor vehicles. A trailer. It therefore prohibits the transit of lorries, articulated vehicles and even towing vehicles, such as transport, boats or caravans. However, the prohibition can be integrated with a panel that allows the towing of trailers with a mass not exceeding that indicated on the panel itself. Pay attention in the quizzes, the signal shown allows vehicles towing an appendage trolley to pass as it is not considered a trailer, and to articulated buses as it is a single vehicle.
Divieto di transito alle macchine agricole.
No transit to agricultural machinery. This sign prohibits the transit of all agricultural machinery of any self-propelled mass, tractor, or towed, agricultural trailers, wheeled or tracked. For the whole 24 hours, however, it allows the transit of road machinery, snowplows and other categories of vehicles.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli che trasportano merci pericolose.
No transit for vehicles carrying dangerous goods. This sign prohibits the transit of vehicles carrying dangerous goods such as petrol or gas. Attention in the quizzes: the prohibition does not concern the type of fuel used by the engine.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli che trasportano esplosivi o infiammabili.
No transit for vehicles carrying explosives or flammables. This sign prohibits the transit of vehicles carrying easily flammable or explosive products. However, it does not concern the fuel contained in the vehicle's tank, even if it is methane, gas.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli che trasportano sostanze inquinanti per l'acqua.
No transit for vehicles carrying water pollutants. This sign prohibits the transit of single vehicles or vehicles with trailers, which carry substances that can contaminate the water.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli più larghi di 2,30 m.
No transit to vehicles wider than 2 meters and 30. This sign prohibits the transit of all types of vehicles wider than that indicated. It can be found before a bottleneck on both urban and extra-urban roads. Please note that the measurement indicated does not represent the width of the road, but the maximum width of vehicles allowed to transit, regardless of whether motorized or not motorized.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli alti più di 3,50 m.
No transit for vehicles over 3 meters and 50 meters high. This sign indicates the maximum height of vehicles that can pass measured from the road level. It therefore prohibits the transit of vehicles with a height including the load greater than 3 meters and 50. It can be found both in inhabited centers and outside.
Divieto di transito ai veicoli o complessi di veicoli più lunghi di 10 metri.
No transit of vehicles or vehicle complexes longer than 10 meters. This sign prohibits the transit of all vehicles or vehicle complexes, such as road trains with a total length of more than 10 meters.
Divieto di transito a tutti i veicoli di massa superiore a 7 tonnellate.
No transit of all vehicles with a mass exceeding 7 tons. This signal prohibits the transit of vehicles having an effective mass in the transit time greater than that indicated. It can be found before a bridge, and if it is integrated with a panel, it can prohibit the simultaneous transit of several vehicles. Attention that this signal concerns all vehicles, both for the transport of things and for the transport of people.
Divieto di transito a tutti i veicoli di massa per asse superiore a 2,5 tonnellate.
No transit to all vehicles with a mass per axle exceeding 2.5 tons. This signal prohibits the transit of vehicles having an effective mass greater than that indicated on the most loaded axle. The vehicle axle and the transverse link between the right and left wheels may be located before a bridge and does not allow transit of any type of vehicle that has an effective mass per axle at the time of transit greater than 2.5 tons.
Via libera.
Go ahead. This is an end of prescription signal that indicates the end of previously imposed prescriptions. For example, prohibitions or obligations. And it applies to any type of vehicle.
Divieto di fermata.
No stopping. This signal prohibits the temporary suspension of the vehicle, which is a stop. Therefore, it essentially does not allow the stop for passengers to get on or off. It also applies to all vehicles, including buses and taxis. And even if it is not supplemented by panels, forced removal of the vehicle is always ordered. The signal is integrated with panel B, indicates that the no stopping stop sign ends at the point where the signal is located, prohibiting stopping in the previous section and allowing the stop after the no stopping sign.
Divieto di sosta.
This prohibition sign is placed in places where parking is prohibited, stopping and suspension of the vehicle running over time, with the possibility of driving away from the driver. On urban roads it prohibits parking from 8 to 20 hours, but, if properly integrated, it can prohibit parking for 24 hours a day along extra-urban roads. Indicates the permanent prohibition of parking without the need for additional information. It can be integrated with panels to indicate the beginning, the continuation, or the end. It loses validity after the first crossing, if not repeated. We pay attention in the quizzes. This signal prohibits stopping, but allows stopping for the boarding and alighting of passengers. If it has additions, it prohibits parking in the section following the sign, allowing it in the previous section. If installed on the left side of the carriageway, it prohibits parking on that side and not on the right side as well. Normally it is not placed in places where, as a general rule, there is a ban on parking, for example on bends or at intersections. Unless otherwise indicated. Let's now see some examples of integration of the parking ban. The signal is integrated by panel B. Except for buses which can therefore park. The signal is integrated with panel B. It prohibits parking only on working days. Signals A integrated with panel B prohibits parking on holidays. The signal is integrated with panel B. Indicates an area where parking is prohibited and where the compulsory removal of the vehicle is envisaged. Prohibition of temporary parking. This is a temporary parking prohibition sign placed in the stretches of road where mechanical cleaning operations are carried out. It prohibits the parking of vehicles on the days and times indicated.
Passo carrabile.
Tow-away zone. This sign indicates the end of a driveway. Area for vehicle access to the side properties. It prohibits stopping in the place where it is placed but allows stopping if the vehicle is not in the way. It also applies both day and night and for all vehicles, including rescue vehicles, if they are emergency service.
Sosta consentita a particolari categorie.
Parking allowed for categories. The prohibition sign depicted represents a specific exception to the no parking. Allows parking for vehicles serving disabled people. On the other hand, add the appropriate mark to any other vehicle other than those used by disabled people.
Regolazione flessibile della sosta in centro abitato.
This signal represents a flexible adjustment of the stop. It allows parking in some hours and life in others, without the need to use the parking disc. Forced removal is not foreseen, unless specifically indicated.
Parcheggio.
Parking. This sign indicates an authorized parking, that is an equipped and organized area. For example, with the tracing of parking spaces delimited for parking. Indefinitely, unless otherwise indicated. It could be integrated with a panel indicating the categories to which the parking area is reserved, or the categories of vehicles excluded from the possibility of parking. It can also be integrated with a panel that indicates further limits or information. For example, the limitation over time. How to arrange the vehicles. The indication of the times and the rates applied to park. Or the distance from the parking lot.
Preavviso di parcheggio.
Parking notice. This sign announces a parking zone, proceeding in the direction of the arrow in 300 meters.